got you.
Yeah, and the thing with so DJ, to your point, the thing with waiting for V2 and it being a little bit low growth, I think the best scenario is V1 is showing you how it's going to work. V2 is refining that, and with V2 coming out, right, there's still the ability to say, well, what else can there be? And recently, in
Yeah.
regards to V2, the questions have been, when's it going live? The expectation is the end of the year. Can someone
Yeah.
still come in and Sybil the network, take over, put a bunch of archaeologists and attack the network? And this is the next step. So with V1, uh, if the archaeologist goes down, the user does not have access to their payload, right? It'll never get decrypted. It's just locked in there, right? So okay, so we need to take it
Yep.
the next step. Let's make it so it's a better chance of getting decrypted. If an archaeologist goes offline, well, there will be others to take its place. So that's where the sharding comes in the 3 of 5. The next thing with 3 of 5 is, will there be good actors, right? This is where we're worrying about something else. What if someone is an archaeologist and they're just a malicious actor? What happens there? And that's where it goes to. Okay, well, we can at that point, depending on how large the pool is, say push. If I'm expecting that the community is going to want that, right? If it's 3 of 5 and there's 3,000 nodes, we can't. And as long as they're obviously working, right? If they're offline, it doesn't matter if there's 3,000. If there's 3,000 online, then we may say, okay, as a community, push to have this bigger, 3 of 5, 4 of 7, or do you want to let a user, if a user wants to create their own M of N, right? I require 7 of 11, 15 out of 15, whatever they want to do. If that's something that the community is pushing for, then the community can create a vote and put that up there. But that kind of leads into the next aspect of kind of what this talk is about, right? So let me get into the slideshow, and we can kind of start this off. So, hello everyone, welcome to the technical talk. This is something I thought would be a good something good to bring up for the community, just to kind of educate on what is going on, because there are very complicated things that go on in the community, right? What is actually going on with the project? What's going on with the encryption? What's going on with the DAO, right? What is the scenario that we're going through? So I figure that it makes the most sense to kind of put this up there and allow one. I'm going to facilitate these talks, but that doesn't mean I'm the only one. I am looking to the community. You don't need to be an ambassador. You don't need to be a developer. Anyone in the community, if you're an expert in a specific area, whether it's with DAOs, with the with marketing, with encryption, with any step that is related to Sarcophagus in any way, we're looking to continue those conversations and actually have them. We want everyone to be a part of them, right? So this is going to be an open forum. Anyone can ask questions, which will typically be at the start and end of each talk. You will ask those questions. We can have that discussion. You can then be involved in the actual conversation along with the talk. As the talk goes along, if you have even a small portion of this topic, if you know even a small portion of this topic, I'm asking you to jump in and to talk, because I find that when you do take part of these conversations, when you are actively listening and actively discussing, you learn better, you understand more. So on the right side, you can see there are a lot of topics that we can cover, right? This specific one that we're doing today is going to be on project structure, but it's not the only thing that we're going to be covering, right? If you have anything to say, if you want to jump in, feel free to jump in, cut me off, whatever you want to do. I'm not here to to tell you what we're going to do. It's free running. I will have a basic outline for each talk that I would like to cover, and you can jump in. You can, if there's something coming up, I will let you know what the topic is, so that you can say, hey, I'm a person who is interested in encryption, and I would like to speak on this one piece. You are allowed to do that, right? We're not stopping anyone from doing anything. In fact, I encourage it that you jump in, that you talk. Again, I will give you the topics. You can come in. You can speak on one piece. You can provide me information for that piece on what you're going to talk about. I will do my best to incorporate it into these slides. And every time we go through this, the slides will come out, and they will be able to be shared among the community to understand what's going on. Since this is the first talk, it's going to be a little bit different in that I'm just going to be kind of explaining what is going on. The next talks, I will briefly run over this ability, and then we'll go right into the talk. So as you can see, coming up, there are quite a few topics we can talk about. Someone has brought up the case of V1 going to V2. What are we going to do about V1? Well, in that process, right, there's a little bit of a split of what's going on, right? If a user should be looking at V1 or V2. If you're in test it in V1. Test as much as you can in V1 until V2 comes out, because that's where you're gonna grasp what's going on, right? When you get your hands on work, you're going to understand it, right? So I encourage you to work on V1. The other thing is the growth of the community. What's going on with the community? There are a lot of topics that are coming out with Sarcophagus. This has to do with education, and I think that the education that is being put out there for Sarcophagus, there is plenty. There is a radio podcast there's a podcast that we're looking to kind of put out there with different people who are working with Sarcophagus or have anything to do with Sarcophagus in a real life use case. There's also an onboarding that everyone is looking to kind of get incorporated, because when you come in, there can be so much information, you don't know what to look for. You just see this topic, you think it's cool, but if you've never heard of a dead man switch, you may stop right there. What's a dead man switch? And just stop. Or you may have a dead man switch and want to learn about it. There will be an onboarding to kind of give you that topic, that idea to go through. So with that said, being that this is the beginning of the talk, are there any questions that have to deal with Sarcophagus, any of these topics, any other topics, what the future holds? I know there are quite a few of you in here that can talk on some of these topics, but being that we're kind of just on the forefront of V2, there may be topics related to that. So please just let me know if you have those questions. Okay. So I'm going to continue. So with today's topic, let me just go back. I will be going in and out of these slides. There are a few websites that I have that are pretty cool to mess with, pretty cool to deal with or see for the first time if it's something that you're interested in, especially when going through what Sarcophagus actually has to deal with. Again, feel free to jump in at any point and talk. So let's get on with it. The project structure, right? This has to deal with the overview of Sarcophagus. What is Sarcophagus really about? What have we seen from Sarcophagus that if you aren't kind of looking at it, you won't understand, right? For the most part, Sarcophagus, right, it is a tool to be used, right? It's a tool to be used by anyone and everyone, right? There is no restriction on who can use it. I've seen some people come in and just say, oh, well, I don't like the way this looks. I don't like how Sarcophagus has to deal with, I know in certain regions things are banned. You can't use specific encryption or specific visuals. That is something that is going to, as Sarcophagus develops, it's going to go away more. I think in a specific topic is we don't, in my country, we don't deal as much with death, right? The visual of death. So if you're looking at Sarcophagus deals specifically with death. For the most part, if you're using Sarcophagus on the actual website, that may be a problem, but the future is to, it doesn't matter. You don't have to interact with the website. You can take the code yourself. Even now, you can take the code yourself, make your own personal Sarcophagus. You don't ever need to go to the website, and you don't have anything to deal with. Of course, you have to know how to put the package together, but you don't ever have to deal with going to the website, right? That's something that's explicit. You don't have to go to one centralized location. That's not where we want to get to. So all these decisions, how everything works, it's all in the public. It's for a specific reason, right? And you can see those pillars, right? There's kind of 4 pillars. There are more, but I just boiled it down to 4 basic pillars that make up Sarcophagus. And the first thing, really, if you want to understand really what Sarcophagus is, it's unlicensed. So unlicensed is a specific license, right? People don't typically know about licenses unless you're in the software community. But there is a famous one is the MIT license. If you're in Linux, there's the GNU license, GNU. There are different versions. Each license has a specific reason or what it actually licenses, right? There's explicit information that creates this contract. And in this case, right, a license is allowing you to do something. If you drive a car, you need to have a license. Why? Because that is the law. You are not essentially certified to do that action. But in this case, unlicensed is the opposite. You don't need a license, right? It's even though it's a license, it's the unlicensed. You don't need anything. You don't need to be certified to do anything. You can take this, and this is directly from this one website, which actually has the explicit documentation that says this is a free and unencumbered software released into the public domain, right? You can do whatever you want with it. You can copy it, you can modify it, you can publish it. You can take Sarcophagus and just sell it. No one is restricting you from doing that. You can, if you think you can make money off it, that is something that you can do yourself. You don't have to wait for anyone. You don't need to look for anyone to okay it. You don't need to someone from the community. You don't need developers. It doesn't matter. That is the spirit of what this is, right? This software is meant to this transcends laws and rules, right? This is more of I'm going to use this, and this is a tool that is going to benefit me. You know, it's a net positive. In this case, no one loses, right? Someone put their time because they thought something was a benefit to society, and that's it. That's the only thing that was used to make this. So if you actually go to this website, it's really cool. Very, very, very basic understanding of licenses, right? You can go through, you can click on specific ones, it'll give you your information. But just to show you how it works, click on license, right? They give you these little pros and cons. But it tells you this is the actual contents of the license, right? You can see more information, but it's telling you anyone is free to copy, modify, publish, use, compile, sell, or distribute. Just to give you an example, right? You can just take this, do whatever. Some licenses, like the Apache license, you need to actually, you can do the same thing as this, but every time you continue with that license, you need to say, this is an Apache license. It came from here. You have to give the source, right? So it can be from more restrictive to less restrictive. There's some where you can do whatever you want, but you can't sell it, and you can distribute it, but you just can't sell it, right? There's some where you can sell it, no problem. Some you can sell it, but you have to kind of work through, jump through some hoops. In this case, the unlicensed is purely you don't need anything. You have all the permissions. There's no liability. There's no warranty. You're unchained in this case, right? So that's something. There's a cool website you can go to. I linked it here. Here's a little quick pros and cons, right? They have the limitations and you don't have any liability and there's no warranties, right? So if the product doesn't work, that's on you to take that risk, whether you want to do that or not, right? So everything else is you can use it for whatever and it's no problem. That shows you kind of where Sarcophagus is in their thought process. There is no restriction here. This is not meant to say, oh, I'm here to... They're not worried about what about our shareholders? That's not a thing. We don't have shareholders, right? It's a project. It's not a company, right? That's the thing with crypto. It's very interesting because of that. This is the best route. This is how we make a good product. If it's free, if it's open, you can take a look at the actual project. You can see what's good, what's bad. If you make a modification and close it off, that's one thing. If you see it and you make a modification and you let the, let's say, so-called developers on Sarcophagus, there may be an adjustment to future SARCO code, right? You are free to make that comment, and I'm sure if they want a good product, that's something that they're going to look at, right? If there is a benefit and it's unanimous, just like how going from V1 to V2, right? There was a vote to say we want to go to V2. If there is some code that comes in, and that's something that's going to be worked on in the future with SIPs, right? Sarcophagus improvement proposals, and SIP, Sarcophagus improvement proposals, you can actually do that, right? You can say, I want to improve this, right? And that's something that can happen. You can take part in the creation of Sarcophagus and the growth of Sarcophagus. So getting back to the actual DAO, right? This is the next one. Let me just go to the slide. When it comes to the DAO, right? This is kind of the next step in the pillar, right? So you saw unlicensed, this is free, no one controls it. The next step is the DAO, right? Again, another step away from no one is in control of this, right? If you want to have some type of organization for your company, for your, I guess not company, but for your project, right? You see most people, if they're a company, and this is kind of the parallel that people put up, they say it's a company. Well, if you're freely organizing and there's no organization, then what is that? What is the best way to handle this without actually having someone directly centralize, it be centralized and say what we can or cannot do? There's no one here doing that, right? Again, this is a community, and the step was to let's move to a decentralized autonomous organization. No one person owns this project. You are free to do whatever you want with the code. If you think it makes sense to try and push for one person to be in charge, you can put that up to vote, because there is a governance aspect, right? There is voting that takes place to run this project. But the only way you can get that vote is by purchasing SARCO. And you then have a voting right, which we're going to get into. But there is governance to actually allow you to make that decision, to then say, I'm one person, I think we should push to have this one person in charge. Well, everyone else who also owns SARCO then says, okay, well, we do like this person, but we don't agree with you, so we're just going to vote down, right? There is a cost to putting up votes, right? And if it costs, depending on the gas, if it costs $200, depending on who you are, you may be less likely to put up a vote. If it costs $1, you're going to be more likely to put up a vote, right? So there is a cost analysis that needs to go into that. But this kind of pushes, it incentivizes the users to make decisions, make choices that are more than likely going to be voted on and approved, right? Is that going to happen every time? No, of course not. That's the whole point of allowing multiple users to vote, right? If you have a SARCO, you have a voting right. You just have to lock it in. When SARCO was created, the only way to vote was to, again, have SARCO. So when it was created, it was minted, and SARCO was placed inside the DAO. Right? So that SARCO was placed in, that's where your voting right is coming from. If the DAO didn't have power to decide what the network does, then these votes wouldn't do anything. Right? So that 80% of the power is saying, okay, here it comes. Here comes the vote. The tokens are 80% of the tokens are here, so it's going to then allow the users to decide what to do with those 80% of the tokens. But the SARCO needs to be outside of that to allow you to vote, right? So there's 80% in, 20% out, and what happens with either side, right? That the amount that's there, that's outside of the DAO, is what's giving you the voting right. Over time, as we've seen, and I'll go through those a little bit quickly. Over time, we've seen that the votes, or more tokens have been put outside of the DAO for specific reasons. There was a farming and a staking. There was originally farming for 1 million Sarco that were time locked. They were released over time. Users got more Sarco. They were able to vote. There are listing. There was also staking that was for 2 million. That's also released over time. And then there was some funding that was going on where users took their own Sarco from those and were starting to make pools, and we've seen pools kind of come up, right? Those pools weren't voted on, which is, that's incredible in itself. That's community deciding, let's make a Uniswap pool, right? No one decided, oh, we're going to vote to make that pool, right? So you don't necessarily need to be working within this DAO to do something in the community. The DAO kind of formalizes it, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to go through here. So some votes that can occur, this is not covering all of them. We've seen farming and staking. If there is a vesting, right? If there is, let's say someone wants to fund Sarco, and they want to get tokens for it. You can't just say, okay, someone behind closed doors just sign a deal. It has to be put up to the DAO, and the DAO has to approve it. So if someone just comes in and says, if I go in and I say I want $2 million or 2 million Sarco or whatever, 20 million Sarco, there has to be a reason for it, and it has to get approved. So if it's in the interest of the project, it'll most likely get voted. If it's not in the interest of the project, or people don't believe it is in the interest, it's not going to get voted on or approved. So that's another thing that, it just pushes it that next step. Anything can be proposed. You can propose anything. Do you want to something like Coinbase or Kraken or Binance for this token to be listed on? That's possible. Someone can put that up there and vote for it. So many people have asked about that, but no one has put it up to a vote. So it seems like it's not as much. The signal is that it's not as wanted as people think it is. People just mention that they want to receive Sarco at a cheaper amount. Well, there's listing fees involved with that, right? So who's going to pay the listing fee? It's going to come from the DAO. So if you want to have it listed there, then you need to make a proposal that people are willing to actually agree on. The next thing was L2s. L2s, this vote was taken from the community. The community wants L2s. So what happened? Some users came in, made that decision. They actually created the bridges, and they just need to be funded. Again, people are asking, where's the funding? Where are the bridges? Again, if you want them to happen sooner, put the vote up. No one is stopping anyone from putting a vote up, but it's not happening. So it seems like it's not as much of a priority as people are making it. Dev proposals, this is common. Same thing with the SIPs I mentioned earlier, the sarcophagus improvement proposals. If anyone is going to propose something, you can formalize it on the DAO, or you can make it in the community. Right? You don't need to wait for the DAO to do that, but if you're going to formalize it, you're gonna put it on the DAO, and that's what the devs did for V2. They said, okay, we'll work on this, but this is what we need for this quarter to work on it. And then there's also community proposals, which again, it can be on the DAO, but it's expensive. Maybe you just want to take it back within the community and do that. So there are things to think about when making this decision. It's not as simple as just put a vote. Well, there's fees involved. Are people going to vote it? Are you wasting your time? Is it something that we really want? Right? Anyone can do that. It's your decision to do that. And the last thing are the sub-DAOs. As DAOs have been created, there are large fees associated with that creation. The thought is that we want a DAO, right? A user wants a DAO, but they don't want to have to put the gas on and pay those fees every time a DAO comes up. So the thought is, how can we better approach that? Let's make a sub-DAO. A sub-DAO is typically something that's been commonly used as Gnosis, but it's a DAO that's not on the same client, which is Aragon. Aragon is a typical client that has been used, or it's the client that's currently used for Sarcophagus, but that takes a lot of fees. Sub-DAOs can be smaller and can be a little bit faster acting, and it avoids these fees, right? So if there is, again, these sub-DAOs typically are voted on. there is a sub-DAO for the one example is there's a sub-DAO for the ambassador program. Well, originally there was the ambassador program is technically not just the ambassador program, it's a community program where if there is any type of funding for videos or articles or contests, it comes from that community DAO. But if every time someone wanted to do a DAO and make a vote and they did it on Aragon, you'd be paying $500 to then pay out, a contest winning of $250. So the idea is let's make it a little bit easier. We'll take it one step below the DAO. The DAO will create this pool, this community pool, and then users can then vote on that, right? It's one step below. It's a sub DAO. So in that case, I also have I have two, just examples of this, right? This is Aragon. You can actually see the votes. This is the Sarcophagus Aragon. These links are on the documents. You can see what has gone up, what has been voted on. This is specifically for finance. You can click in, you can see that, right? This is something really cool. You should actually go in and see this because it's important to understand what has been voted on, why it's been voted on. Can you kind of decipher that from this? The other thing is the Sarcophagus Governance. Right? You can get to all these places from the sarcophagus.io website. This is Sarcophagus Governance. This is where you lock in your tokens, right? You will have a balance here that says, let's say 100 Sarco. You put in 100, you hit increase, you then have your VR. The only way you can vote is if they are locked in. You need to lock in your voting rights, and it will then appear here, and it'll show you your voting power. Then to actually make the vote, you will go on Aragon to see the formalized vote, and you can make it right there. So something cool. Again, it's located within the docs. You can see that there. Are there any questions before we get past this? Anything that anyone wants to bring up about DAOs or how this kind of works? How do you get the voting rights? What can be voted on? Why would you vote on the DAO versus just pushing it in the community? It depends on how much of an impact it has on the actual network. If it's something the community can decide on, you don't need to put it on here, right? But if it's something that is you want it to be formalized, you want it to lock it in and forever be linked to Sarcophagus, you may want to put it on the DAO.
Yeah, hello.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Good. How are you?
So it says something about having uh sarcophagus coming to a place where people don't exactly need to visit the website to create a sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm.
So they can write about doing from I'm not really sure what you mean, but how possible is it that people can just create a sarcophagus without actually visiting the tomb?
So right now, right? That code is up there, right? The actual code exists on GitHub. You would have to take that code, and you'd actually have to create your own network, right? For one person to do this alone, it's possible, but it's very hard, right? You need to create your own instance of you need to create your own token. You need to take the code. You need to have create a archaeologist with that token, and then you can actually go in and create that yourself, right? Then you can go in and embalm that yourself. So while possible, it would be very if you are not I wouldn't say an expert. If you are not adept at code, it would be hard for you to do that, right? Is it possible? Yes. So that kind of clarifies that point. However, right, maybe you can't do it now. In the conversations that have been posted in some of the articles, it seems that something that I mentioned before, the developers, right, or the developers that were voted on, and I believe this conversation was held in Jekyll Island when people were there because it appeared in the Jekyll Island article. With V2, there is looking to be an SDK, Software Developers Kit. What this will allow users to do is you don't need to set up your own archaeologist, your own token, your own embalmer, right? You don't need to do any of that. There will be essentially with the SDK, right, the Software Developers Kit, you will be able to call to the network, so someone can create their own front end, and it can still be the network. So a network that it's pretty much you're leveraging the network that exists, and you just have to make the front end for it. So significantly easier than what I'm saying now, right? This code there now, of course you can do that, but this SDK will make that significantly easier for users. It will give you steps. So I'm not sure how much your knowledge is on SDKs, but what happens is typically when they're created, there's documentation that explicitly tells you if you want to look at what archaeologists are available, use this line of code, right? It's built into the actual software, right? Use this line of code. So someone would make a website that says they don't have to mention anything with Sarcophagus. They can say someone can create a website and say, what file are you creating? What file are you encrypting? So you can say, I'm encrypting this file. Okay, it'll cost you this much. In the background, it's actually being paid in Sarco, right? A company can come in and make this and say, okay, we'll cover the Sarco, and we'll quote you a different price. Let's say you're in the U.S., right? And it's a legal company. They're using Sarcophagus in the background. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know that they're using that. You just need to know that their product works. So you can go to them and say, I want this file. They say, okay, put the file here. They see one price from Sarcophagus on the back end. Let's say it's 100 Sarco. They say, okay, it's going to cost you 125 USD. So they're making $25 on that. You're then saying, okay, I'll pay for that. And they'll say, okay, in a year, if you want to increase this, come back to us, right? The SDK will allow that to occur. It'll streamline how Sarcophagus is used. If you are more technically tech friendly, if you know how to use Sarcophagus, you would probably go to the website. If you don't know, if it's a grandparent, they're most likely going to want to go to that website, which is, I'll just upload a file, right? That makes it significantly easier. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that's something that you don't want. The people in the Sarcophagus community tend to be people who are technically adept, so they can go to sarcophagus.io. But for the benefit of this project is that you shouldn't need to be adept, and that's, I think, that's something that you don't want to have to think, is my Sarcophagus going to be successful? You don't want to ever have to think about that, right? So that seems like what V2 is doing. We're making sure you don't have to worry about what happens if an archaeologist goes down. It's taken care of. We don't want you to have to think about what is here, right? I don't want to think about that when I'm doing Sarcophagus. So from what has been proposed, I think it makes a lot of sense. And those articles really go into detail. I think Miggs does a great job of USC Miggs does a great job of explaining that, of what occurred at that meeting. And I think it's nice to kind of, we tend to see people in here in these chats. That's a good conversation to have. People are not aware that how far, or that what licensing, people don't even think about what the license is. You can actually do that right now, but in the future it's going to be much easier. And I think the community and the DAO has made that kind of a little bit more apparent now. But you kind of have to read through some of them. You have to read through the tea leaves, but the others, they're kind of it's in our face, and we just don't realize how much easier it can be. So that's something cool that's going to happen. So the next piece I'm talking about is the token. How can you vote, right? What is the incentive for you to actually use the token? What is actually going on? So the original minting created 100,000 tokens. Those 100,000 tokens were then separated. It was 80% to the DAO, 20% to the builders. The builders are the first hands-on approach to the actual sarcophagus, right, to the project. They were the security, the developers, the creators, anyone who was really involved with it, right? That is who that 20% is. That's also, we tend to see, you can see those everything's on chain, right? So you can look and see who owns those tokens, or not, I guess not who, but synonymously where those tokens are, right? But the 80% has broken down. You can see here that the 80% has been broken down. There's 1% for the liquidity mining, 2.5 for the LP farming. There's these vesting contracts that were approved. You see where the distribution is. The DAO net. So because of that, that Sarco came from the DAO and is now in the public, right? How can that happen? That's all because of the DAO. The DAO made those votes. People wanted to say, I want SARCO tokens. I want to be able to stake my stable coins and get tokens. That happened. People said, I want to work on Uniswap. I want to lock in my SARCO tokens or my Ethereum and get SARCO. I'm in. Or I want to lock in my SARCO tokens and get more SARCO. I'm in. The DAO, right, approved these vesting contracts. There's 2 vesting contracts where people said, we want to provide some type of funding. In this case, it was a stable coin. We want to provide stable coins, but we want SARCO. Said, okay, that's fine, but it needs to go up to the DAO. No one's going to just no one's just going to give SARCO away for free, right? Give something to get something. So in this case, they gave some type of USD, and they got SARCO for it. So one thing to note, and people don't really realize this, is that although there are 100,000 tokens, there is a deflationary aspect to it, and that is the slashing. The slashing comes into effect with the archaeologist and if they're a bad actor, and I'll get into that. We'll come back to that piece. So in this case, Sarcophagus is essentially a utility token. What is it used for? Why is it a utility token? Utility tokens mean the sole reason for the Sarco is it just exists to be used, right? It's a utility in that an embalmer will pay to keep their information encrypted, and an archaeologist is paid to encrypt, right? It's all done through Sarco. Sarco's pure existence is, it's not just a regular token that you just trade and say, okay, I'm worried about the number going up. That's no relevance, right? The real use case for it is the embalmer is incentivizing the archaeologist by saying, I will give you this much Sarco if you keep my documentation or file encrypted, right? So that's where the deflationary aspect comes in. If the embalmer pays the archaeologist to encrypt for, let's say, hold my file for a year, and the archaeologist does not do that, in that they go offline or decrypt earlier, there is a slashing event. The slashing event will actually burn the archaeologist's tokens that they put up. Whenever a sarcophagus is created, the archaeologist has to put up collateral. So if they're being paid 100 Sarco to hold the file for a year, in the simplest terms, the archaeologist will also have to put up 100 Sarco. If the archaeologist does not resurrect when it's supposed to be, that 100 Sarco is actually burned. We now have 99,999,900 Sarco, right? There's a deflationary aspect that people aren't realizing. I haven't seen any questions on slashing events. People just take it as I haven't seen people really talk about it. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they do understand it. The thing that people don't realize is it's not just burning the collateral. It's also affecting the how much you need to put up for collateral, right? It can go anywhere from you need to cover 10% of what the embalmer is putting up to 100% of what they're putting up. And that happens over time. It's a network variable that occurs. It kind of works. It's updating daily, but it looks at the past month. So if someone has questions about that, we can go into that. But essentially, right from the beginning, it is a 10% reserve. There's a 10% reserve requirement. So if someone puts up 100 Sarco, the archaeologist needs to put up 10 for every single sarcophagus they create. If there's one bad actor, that reserve requirement will ratchet up. It'll go up a basis point based on how many how many archaeologists are bad actors. The most it can be is 100%. So you may have to put up collateral for 100%, but that's all based off a network variable, based off of if the archaeologists are bad actors. Someone gonna say something?
Where's Zuka?
Yeah, just one quick thing on that was mentioned to me a while back was that while we're in the earlier versions of it, they have kept that at a 100% bond. Like they released it at 100% bond, and it's been kept that way as far as I know. They haven't instated the 10% and then the ratcheting feature yet.
And I think that'll make more sense as the as the project starts to develop and more users begin to use it, whether it's on Sarcophagus or outside, using just like the SDKs, it'll all be on one network to make it a little bit more efficient. Because obviously, as you're using more, you'll know what makes more sense. The network will be able to decide what makes sense. Because if one person was making a decision, there could be a problem. But so that's something just to keep in mind. It's 100% right now. If someone wants you to hold something and they require you to have they're saying, I'll pay you 1,000 Sarco, you then need to have 1,000 Sarco available to match that. So that's something just to keep in mind if you're going to go down that path of an archaeologist. So continuing with that, and something I mentioned on the previous page is with the DAO, what does the Sarco do? It gives you a voting right. 1 Sarco equals 1 voting right. So for every Sarco, that counts as a vote. So the more Sarco you have, the more votes you have. Less Sarco you have, less votes you have. So you can keep that in mind when you're making decisions on what makes more sense for the network. If you think this network is a necessity to the world, you may want to have more Sarco so that you can make more votes. So that's something just to keep in mind. The other thing that with the DAO, right, is people mentioned centralized exchanges, right? You can vote to list the tokens there, and I covered this before, but just to go into it. With a centralized exchange, there are requirements to list the SARCO token. Usually there's a fee, right? From what I've seen, it's anywhere from 10,000 to much smaller exchanges. I've seen 100,000 and I've seen 500,000 for certain exchanges. Typically, it ranges. It's around that from what I've seen. From what I know, it's around 100,000. So if you were to allow users to, let's say you wanted to list this on a centralized exchange, that would need to go up to a DAO, and you can say, okay, we want the DAO to fund this. Let's fund the centralized exchange. So not only are they going to be funding the liquidity, they need to pay for the 100,000 USD that's needed to list it. So something just to keep in mind with these tokens on why it seems that they're not on centralized exchanges. L2s will definitely allow a much more reduced fee of the token, and something that someone mentioned before, why isn't it listed on these bridges yet? If they're listed on these, so the way a bridge works, right, is essentially you put 1 token in, and 1 token comes out on the other side of the bridge, and the fees are taken care of upfront. Right? However, you can't get that. You wouldn't be able to get those tokens out until you are ready to take them out. But if you're only using it to just get Sarco, you're better off just going to a decentralized exchange. Right? And the reason that is because L2s are meant to make the fees easier to kind of use, one, to purchase the SARCO token, but to also benefit in the existence of the SARCO token. The SARCO token exists solely for L2s. If there were tokens on Polygon right now, the only thing you'd be able to use them for is to just hold it, right? You're going to wait to use them with the actual sarcophagus as it's being built. So the reason why that's being waited on is that is eventually going to be voted on to fund those bridges, but it makes more sense when V2 comes around and it can actually be incorporated in those, in the use of sarcophagus, right? The whole reason these bridges are to avoid fees. If you want to avoid, the reason why you want to avoid fees is so you can use it easier and cheaper, and the way that works is when we get it to work, when the team gets it to work with the actual embalmer and archaeologist. So if a user wants to use that can be funded. You don't have to wait, but it's just something to keep in mind. Then also with sub-DAOs, right? You can use tokens on sub-DAOs to show your voting rights. A sub-DAO can make that decision themselves, but just something to kind of keep in mind. But again, all these decisions, right? While there may be people that say, oh, we should do this and we should do that, people who are more, someone just to point out, like someone like Johnny, who's a little bit more vocal about ideas, you don't need to wait for Johnny to make that decision to put something out there, right? There's not one single person who's in charge of this, so that's kind of where we're going to next. And then last, we have the decentralized exchanges. Someone decided, I'm going to provide liquidity on Uniswap. Well, it turns out that Uniswap ended up being what was the then pool for the LP farming. So that's something cool. The community started something, and because so many people wanted to be a part of it, it then pushed the farm to say, let's go and let's get into that. But so again, something cool to note is that, or I guess something interesting to note is this lowering or ratcheting of the reserve requirement. You're covering 100% of the. You have to have collateral of 100% whenever you're creating an archaeologist. So that's cool. So the next thing, finally, is kind of the most important part of this pillar. So we have unlicensed, right? Meaning it's a free project. Anyone can take a part of it, can take it and use it themselves. They can sell it if they want to, but they can make it themselves. It would be much harder to do now, but the future will make it much easier for you to kind of use Sarco as your backbone. The next thing is the DAO. No one person is in charge of Sarcophagus. If you want to formalize it, you can go through the DAO. You don't need to use a DAO, but if it's something relating to how the project is functioning, it would have to go through the DAO. Then we have the token. What makes it that you have to go through the DAO or provides you a right to be the DAO? Well, the more Sarco you have, the more power you have when it comes to voting, right? The more you kind of believe in Sarcophagus, the more you can afford to put into it, the more you can actually say, we should go in this direction, right? Finally, the most important part is the community. This is everyone, right? This is if there's a developer, if there's a creator, if there's a builder, if there's an ambassador, if there's a community. Essentially, like I said before multiple times, no one person is in charge of what's going on here. So that's why it's important that if you are in the community and you want to see this project succeed, make your voice heard. That can either be by voting, that can be by talking, that can be by providing anything to the project. Right? That can be bringing up questions, talking about it, saying what you think the app should do better, and some things we've seen that I'm saying it. And that's what's nice about the community. Everything is here. Make the app as easy as possible to use. So what came from that? We saw that with V2. They mentioned they're going to do SDKs. Make it so simple that someone can create a front end and they can allow people to use it and not even know they're using Sarcophagus. Then there's this piece. Are there any gaps of knowledge that would benefit the community? Do people really understand what's going on? Why the project is shaped like this? Why it seems like one person isn't in charge and it's kind of, you need to kind of do something yourself or be a part of it to push Sarcophagus in a direction? That's an important piece, because that's what Sarcophagus is. It's not one person deciding where this is going. It's the community saying, let's move in this direction. And if we're going in a slightly wrong direction, someone else in the community say, let's change that direction slightly, or let's change it a lot. If people don't disagree, it's going to keep going in that direction, right? Imagine a snowball going down the hill and you can move it. You have a voice in saying where that snowball goes, and if it turns into an avalanche or not. So that's kind of where we get to here, right? What can you do to become a part of this community, either more involved or just a fly on the wall? You can do either one. You can take part in these Sarcophagus improvement protocols or proposals. That should be proposals. You can propose those. You can there are contests, there are bounties, right? If there was a test recently on the new tomb that has come for V1. If you took part in that, people received rewards for that, right? That's something that it's important, and the more people you can get to use it, the more you can see if it can be broken, right? Just try to break it, because that it's going to put out a better product where you don't have to worry about, is this product going to work? You don't want to have to think about, does this product work? Shouldn't even be something that you're thinking about. If there's something you like to write about that's not discussed, you can do that. You can make an article. If there's a video that hasn't been covered, recently there was couple videos that came out. There's always the intro video. Recently, I actually did myself. I did an updated test of updated tutorial of the archaeologist. So that's something you can do. Also, right, something that we've seen that is important is this is not just an English speaking community, right? So if you see an article, if you see a video, you can feel free to go in and translate it. If especially with videos, right? You see videos and we don't have any videos that are translated unless a user is a native speaker and they're like, I'm just gonna make a video for it, right? I believe we've seen DJ, who's not here, DJ Coro, took a video and reached out to me and said, I'm gonna make this same video you did and I'm gonna put it in my language. I said, okay, go for it. I also saw a video where the video was greatly edited. It was a perfect edit. I said, can I take this video and just voice over it? Yeah. So that's something that's cool about the communities. Feel free to reach out and ask. You don't need, honestly, you can, for the most part, it's best to just say, why do you need to wait for someone to tell you to do something? Just go ahead and do it. Same thing with images and banners. We've seen the same thing. People have made an image or a banner, and it's great. And you can easily come in and say, well, this is great if you spoke English. So I'll translate this to whatever native tongue you're from. Finally, there's these meetings, these meetups, right, that we're doing, these kind of education sessions. There's one with Decent DAO and Sarcophagus coming up, and that's going to be a good one. There's also a conversation with Boston College is also doing a presentation on Sarcophagus, which is cool to see it kind of getting into some schools. Finally, there's these discussions. The whole reason for this education is not to just throw information at you and just say, take that and just sit there and enjoy it yourself. It's to ask questions that maybe people are scared to ask, or something you don't understand, right? Because I think as we grow together, we can learn together. No one ever learns just by, I'm not learning by talking. If you guys don't ask me questions, I won't think about something other than the way I've always been thinking about it. That's why I think it's very important to ask those questions. Okay, so the review is unlicensed to free the code, DAO to decentralize the organization, the token to allow the DAO to exist, and behind all of that is the community. Right, so that's kind of, those are the four pieces that are the most, those are, to me, the way I see it, right? This is, I'm someone in the community that thinks this is important to understand this, so that's why I made this, right? People don't know this. Or they just assume that if you're an ambassador or you're part of actually making the project go. The only reason I'm here is because I see what this can do, and I see that there's things that can be fixed. So I'm just part of it. I don't know any, I'm not a part of this any more than you. That's why it's important to say, it doesn't matter if you're a developer or a builder or ambassador or a community member. Each person is just as important, and what you bring to the table is kind of, the most important piece. Actions speak louder than words. If someone is a community member and they're doing everything they can to help versus a community member who just wants to be, just wants to look on, that's fine. But if you're, you get to decide where this project goes. Okay, so you are free to mute, ask questions. Again, you can ask questions at any time, but this is now another question portion where users can kind of jump in, talk. I was thinking to kind of make this a little bit nice to just have it not recorded, but I figured let me just make it a little bit easier because I know not everyone's going to be here. People are down on crypto with obviously when there are downtimes, people are worried about that. So Sarco knows Sarco doesn't care, right? Sarcophagus doesn't care. It doesn't matter what the price is. That doesn't affect Sarco. The only thing I ever seen from any community members is that Sarco is its utility token. That's all that matters.
So I'm thinking, shouldn't there be some sort of prerequisite for the sarcophagus improvement proposals, the SIPs? say how long the person has to be in the community, or say is the person a SARCO token holder and stuff like that to consider someone's proposal, or can write about anybody create an SIP?
So so
From oh,
any
go ahead.
yeah, that's a good point, right? Here's the thing, right? If it's affecting the um, the project or the network, my thought is there shouldn't be a restriction on who can do that, right? If you don't know how to write code, that's one thing, but if you don't know how to write code, you're not going to know what you're doing with this. If you have a proposal, it's going to go up on the DAO. So if let's say I come in, I don't know what I'm doing, and I say we should generate every single Sarco, the next, I guess there's 57% of the Sarco in the DAO, 56.9. Someone makes a proposal that every time there's a sarcophagus, quick change gets, 100 Sarco. One, that costs me money to do that. Two, if I'm not showing how I'm going to do that, that's another thing against me. And three, it still has to be voted on. So I don't think we should restrict who can do it, but if your proposal doesn't make sense, you really shouldn't be, it would make less sense to do it that way, right? Does that make sense, right? I can definitely see what you're saying. Oh, do we want to restrict it? Be a Sarco member, have this many tokens. But if this is a DAO, someone can not have any Sarco tokens, and it could be the best idea ever. And if they have the proposal, why wouldn't we say yes? But if they're gonna come with a bad proposal, it's gonna get voted down because you need a certain amount of people to vote for that, and you need a certain percentage to approve it.
Yeah.
And it costs money. Imagine putting up a vote that makes no sense and it costs you $500.
Oops.
Yeah, exactly. They're not gonna do it. You're not gonna put up a proposal if it's gonna cost you that and get voted down. And imagine you just keep doing it. Oh, it'll get passed eventually. But the thing with that is, you need a certain amount. First, a certain amount of the public Sarco needs to be in that. John, do you know the percentage? I thought it was 20% of the circulating supply. So let's say there's 10 million circulating. It's more than that. But let's say there's 10 million circulating. First, you need 20% of that supply. So let's say you need 2 million votes, and then you need a certain approval rating. So you need, I think it's 60% to approve it. So first, you need 2 million people, 2 million Sarco to be voted to even get it to even looked at, and then you need 1.2 million to agree to it. So that's gonna be hard. And then if not, there's $500. And then you put up again, there's $500, right? Just gonna keep going, and it's gonna just keep getting. As long as people who are in the network, care about the network, are voting, in the interest of the network, you would constantly vote it down. No one should say, yeah, we should give this guy a 100 Sarco every time it goes through. That is the barrier to entry. Now, if someone has a lot of money, they can just keep doing it. But if they have a lot of money, they could do worse things than that. I don't think Sarco is their target if they have a lot of money and they're trying to take over a network. Just kind of my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. I know, Johnny, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was gonna basically say the same thing you did to Edzy earlier. You covered it though.
Okay. But these are good questions, and I know, Edzy, you mentioned, and it's something that I want to push in here, since you're one of the you're a pretty big community member here. You brought up the podcast, and I don't know if you want to I saw that I thought that's a great idea to kind of bring people who are using Sarcophagus to kind of understand what's going on, and I think that would actually greatly benefit what is going on in the future for Sarco, right? To kind of say, this is what Sarco does. If you're a lawyer, how can you use this? Well, if you're going to Sarcophagus, it may be a little hard, but in the future, using that question you asked about how can someone come in and just use this for themselves right now, That's how, and that's something that can be brought up on those podcasts. So these are great questions, and they're not questions that I can think of myself. That's why it's important that you guys jump in, and you guys are an integral part. Everyone here is a big piece of this community. That's why it's so important that we ask questions and have these discussions.
Yeah, I was actually thinking because from what I was hearing earlier when I joined the session, I don't actually think we need V2 to be out already before we can start putting our word about sarcophagus and stuff like that. Because the truth is, a lot of people will actually join this project because of the essence of it. And now the thought of the possibility of having a sarcophagus is actually enough to keep people around till V2 comes. So we bring them in like this is what we're expecting. V2 is coming. Like they can see it's coming. There's V1 already. So V2 is an improvement of V1. So we don't exactly need V2 to be out already before we start making moves. So
No.
that's actually my thinking in this.
I think so. I think you're right. I think this is the time because of where kind of Sarco is in that we know there's going to be an improvement, right? That's what the expectation is, that V2 is going
Yeah.
to be a leap forward. Why not give people the education that they need to understand the power of sarcophagus, right? And that power is it's very very explicit. You don't need to give up all your belongings to have them protected legally. That's not. This is meant to break those break those
Yeah.
barriers or speed bumps. So this is the time to
I mean,
educate.
yeah, I mean, people have actually waited much longer than a year for projects which would permit me to use the phrase much less essence than what sarcophagus is trying to achieve. They actually waited. Then V2 is right about December, right? So if the timeline is between now and December, then it's not a lot of time people can actually wait. So why
Yep.
wait when we can actually start
No
something right
reason to
away?
wait. Get people involved. And there's also been mention of having these discussions. Not it doesn't necessarily have to be this type of discussion, but have discussions about the project going forward. Whether that's on Twitter, on Twitter Spaces, that's in long form or short form discussions, or that's in the chats, whether it's Telegram or Facebook or Discord or wherever it is. Right? Keep the ball rolling. No reason to say, okay, let's take your foot off the gas when just getting started.
No, definitely. We
Also,
don't need to like actually wait on V2 for anything. I mean, it'd be, cool to have V1 or, V2 here, but we don't need to wait for that to tell people about the concept and what it's going to do or anything like that for sure.
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
about centralized exchanges, though,
Yes.
I kind of heard Binance does not charge listing fees. They list products based on utility and
Mm-hmm.
essence, kind of.
Yeah. So
So I
I've
think,
you're right with that. There are
That might be an
certain
ethos issue though.
there are certain exchanges that they will list you if it makes sense for them. But for the most part, right, and I've spoken to a couple people, typically when a token gets listed, if you're going to them, you're paying for it, and it's a lot of money. But you're right. You're right with that. I've definitely seen. I think I know a couple exchanges where they will actually first pay to fund you. They will like kind of do like a startup funding of like your project. They'll pay for some equity in the not equity, but they'll pay for tokens, and then they list it.
yeah,
And that's where I'm like, well, that's a DAO thing. That's not a decision that people are gonna make. So if someone, and then I think at that point, from what I've seen, um, that second contract was the last that the DAO was going. That from what I've seen, the articles show that the second vesting contract is pretty much all the DAO needs. So I don't know if there's going to be a future one. I don't know if people are going to vote for it. I don't know if anyone wants to even propose it since there was 2 already. Obviously the more that people create these vesting contracts, the less Sarco that are out there. So you don't know what the community is going to do. But again, it's not up to the community at the end of the day. We shall see. Okay, so that is the technical talk. In the next topic, right, from this, what I'm thinking to do, right, I wanted to do encryption, but being that it is the first topic, being that we're going to the next one, I think it makes more sense to let the community decide. So my thought is to actually put up in the general channel, I'm going to put up these topics. I'm going to put up I'll put up every single one of these topics. And then what I will do is I'll say, put up a specific emoji for that. If you don't want any of these emojis, don't want any of these topics, you can then just type it in and reply to me and tell me what topic you think it makes sense for the community to actually go through. I think this is the best way to decide the next case. And what we'll do is we'll go through each topic until we kind of get to the end. I'm looking to do this monthly, just because, with more kind of events going on with Sarco, I think it makes more sense to do monthly. And if we see that it's kind of the same users and not everyone has the opportunity to go in, I will look to change times, and we'll look to change the occurrence, how often it occurs, or whether it's shortened or increased. So that's just my thought. And again, if you want to run a talk, feel free to reach out to me. Right? This is not just well, I can help you. I'm not going to do this myself. I just think it's nice to get these conversations out there. We can kind of dig in on each of these topics. I will also be reaching out specifically to you if there's a topic, let's say like a DAO. I will be reaching out to Johnny in that instance, and I also be reaching out to maybe Migs in that instance. And when it comes to something like working through these use cases, Edsy, I can reach out to you. So depending on what it is, I may be reaching out to you, and if you're kind of a little bit more boisterous in the community, I may be looking to reach out to you as well. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
session, man.
Thanks for your time, bro.